Dr. Bradley Gottfried, who serves as the College of Southern Maryland's 4th president, is also a noted Civil War historian. Having written 9 books about the war, his latest is The Maps of Antietam. Dr. Gottfried, who is a frequent presenter and instructor on Civil War topics, recently sat down to discuss his approaches to writing about the Civil War.
Is so critically important. What I try to do is to visit the battlefield before I begin writing, just to get a flavor of it, whether it's Antietam or Bull Run. So, you know, I know where the hills and valleys are. I know where the roads are, etc. And then I'll start writing. And then oftentimes, not oftentimes, every time, when I'm done, I will usually go out to the battlefield again, and just because now I have a different perspective. You know, Burnside Bridge. Yes, I would visit it, and yes, I knew a little bit about what happened there, but now I know exactly what happened there because I've visualized it. When you're writing, when you're doing maps, I could smell the smoke, quite frankly. I can hear it, and so I have a different perspective of what really happened there. What's interesting, whenever you do this kind of project, you know, you're working with the maps, you're working with the text, and oftentimes it becomes, well, which do you start with? And for me, I'll start with the text. I'll start writing the text. And I should explain how I do this. On these map books, you have a map on, you know, you open the book, on the left side is the map, on the right side is the description. So you can actually see then, you can read about what's happening, look over at the map, go back, and you can go back and forth, rather than flipping through and, oh, where's that text or where's the map? So I'll start on the text, and then I will go back and start working on the map, and then it becomes back and forth, which is very nice because I can actually visualize what's going on, and that improves the writing, but the writing improves the map. So it really is a synergy. And I don't do one or the other. I do them both at the same time. When I first started these map books, they were black and white. And Maps of Gettysburg, first edition, black and white maps. And it was because they were going to be printed in this country. It was still a $40 book. And then the editor said, you know what? I just found a way that we can do it in color. Same price. And it is amazing. So they reprinted the Maps of Gettysburg, but this time in full color. And when you put a map book or a map that is in full color against one that's black and white, I mean, it just pops. And I think that also affects how people perceive the project. Because I hate to say it's pretty, but it's compelling. You know, you can see the various coloration patterns of roads and streams, whereas oftentimes in black and white, is that a road or is that a stream? Now you can see it because there's different color. And even the colors I've used have evolved over time to be much more vivid. And if you look at the Maps of Gettysburg book, for instance, it's almost pastels. The Antietam book that just came out, it's much more vivid and just pops right out of the page. One of the challenges is getting accurate information. You have really 2 major kinds of information. One are the primary sources. These are the people that were there on the battlefield. And you might say, this is great. You know, you just rely on what they tell you because they have provided letters, diaries, articles, books, etc. What you find out is some are more reliable than others. You can have 2 men that were literally fighting side by side in a battle, and they saw it completely differently. So you have to take that into account. You also have the issue of time. As time goes on, these men would start to forget what really happened, but they would be reading accounts. They'd be talking to others, and it becomes, okay, what they're describing 20 years after the battle, is it something they really saw? They thought they did, but how much was influenced by others? And so the best primary sources are those that were written right after the war when they weren't influenced. But one Confederate soldier once said that he was in many battles. He never saw more than 20 feet in front of him. So, you know, sometimes these soldiers will talk as though they saw the whole battlefield. They never saw the whole battlefield because you had all this white smoke. You know, they were using black powder, and it would envelop the field. So they didn't see a whole lot to begin with. And when you see something where it is so dramatic and it is so expressive, oftentimes that's a red flag because they really didn't. Then you have the secondary sources. These are authors like myself who are taking primary information and then they are distilling it into, well, this is what I think happened. And again, they're only as good as the sources they're using. The best source for the Civil War, by the way, is 128 volumes. It's called the Official Records of the Civil War. And after each campaign, the Confederates, the Union generals, colonels, etc., would have to file, and they still do it, after battle reports. And so and they would be accurate because it would be right after the battle. Problem was, so often, if they turned tail and ran, or if their men didn't fight well, they're really not going to explain exactly what happened because they have to be careful. You know, are they going to lose face or are they going to be court-martialed? So even that is not as accurate. What you usually find is that people will, I don't know if they actually read it cover to cover, as much as they might be going to the battlefield and they'll say, okay, I'm going to be going to Harper's Ferry. I'm going to read that section. But I think in some cases, those who can't get to the battlefields will, you know, read through it. But what's interesting, I never realized they would do this. You'll have people like the Gettysburg book that I always hear about. They'll be reading a secondary source on the battle, and they will have the maps of Gettysburg right there with them, because there's never enough, in most books, there's never enough maps. So here there are plenty of maps, and then they can say, oh, okay, now I understand this other volume. I've had books that people have come over to have me sign that are muddy, that are ripped, that are, I mean, and, you know, you might say, well, you know, am I upset by that? No. They've used that book. They've had it out in the field, and it is well thumbed, and I really appreciate that. It's very difficult to be a college president and to be productive because this is really a hobby. It's an avocation. One thing that I do say is it is a way to relieve stress. So there are many times, like the beginning of every semester, it's busy, and I just don't have the time, so I will put it aside and do other kinds of things in the morning. And I should emphasize, all of this is done during free time. So I wake up in the morning, usually about 3 o'clock in the morning, get a cup of coffee, and I start working until about 6 or so. So I have a few hours. Weekends, I work till about 8 in the morning, and usually that's it. But getting up at 3 and working for those couple hours every single day, I see the constant progress. Now, there are times, as I mentioned, where I've got a report, I've got a speech, I've got to do something. I'll do those kinds of activities. The professional things, they're always much more important. Now that the Antietam book is finished, I've actually finished another one, and this is a shorter book. The Antietam book's 124 maps. The one I finished that's ready to go to the publisher it's called After Gettysburg, Fall of 1863, and most people have never heard about it. But Meade was in a lot of trouble with Lincoln. Lincoln was beside himself. You know, finally he had a general who could beat Lee, but he didn't finish off Lee. You know, so here was Lee after the Battle of Gettysburg. The Potomac River had swollen. There were no pontoon bridges, and there is Lee with his back against the Potomac River. And here is Meade coming up with still his very large army, and a decision was made by Meade not to attack. So this campaign was really redemption, where Meade needed to corner Lee during the fall campaign and try to destroy him. And a lot of campaigning, a lot of moving back and forth. A few battles, not big battles, Bristow Station, Mine Run, Payne's Farm, Rappahannock Station, small actions, but it's the kind of thing where, you know, you had men who died and were mortally wounded, and they deserve that story to be told. So, and the reason why I did that one, because that's probably going to be even more or less popular than First Bull Run, is because I wanted to catch the sesquicentennial. Right now I'm working on the Overland Campaign. This is when Grant comes east, and the Wilderness Campaign, Spotsylvania, Cold Harbor, up to Petersburg. That could be 2 or 3 volumes right there. And I never know when I start, I never can say, okay, this book is going to be X number of maps. It just sort of flows. I can't even say, okay, here's how I'm going to divide it. I sit down and I start writing, and it just sort of flows. And in this case, 81 maps, and that's it. You know, in the Antietam book, 124, that's how I told the story. You know, I try not to shrink it. I try not to expand it. It's just what feels right.